my world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Good afternoon and welcome to Dublin City FM. You're listening to LGBTQlife with myself, Mick Fitzgerald. And today, not only do we have a very full programme for you, we have a heritage programme to a degree as well. Because joining me in the studio will be two of the performers of a fabulous play that's opening in Smock Alley this evening. I'm joined first of all by actor-director Mark O'Reilly. Mark, welcome to Dublin City FM or LGBTQlife. And his co-performer, Kevin McMahon. Kevin, welcome to LGBT Life as well.
Thanks, Mick.
Now, let's talk about, we'll start at the very beginning. Both of you guys are with a company called Melia Theatre. Tell us, what's the background to that?
So, Melia Company is my own. I founded Melia Company just out of college. So, myself and Kevin were in college together. We're both graduates of the DIT drama program, or well, TUD now. Mm-hmm. And straight out of college, we knew we wanted to start making work. So, Melia just came straight from that. The name is coming from, I've kind of a lifelong obsession with Greek mythology and myths and things like that. And in Greek mythology, the 9 muses, who are, you know, kind of the patrons of the arts or kind of bearers of the arts, 2 of them, one for tragedy and one for comedy, Melpomene and Thalia. So, Melpomene, Thalia, Melia.
Gosh, these chaps with classical education, you can't hold a candle to them. And Kevin, yourself, I mentioned that Mark is also a director. Are you any hankerings beyond trading the boards as well?
At the moment, well, the focus is on the acting, and that looks like where I'm heading for the future. So no, I let Mark take control with the directing, and then we have some great guys in with stage management, lighting and producing and all the rest. Yeah,
so long as, as we say, so long as he brings out the best in you, that's the...
that's it.
That's the main thing. The other issue it's not an issue, just the other point worth mentioning, you're both involved, particularly Mark, with, and I'm going to unashamedly say it, my favourite theatre in Dublin, which is, Smock Alley is a fabulous venue. I was there before it was in its current stat, when it was pretty much almost a wreck. You could see the walls and everything like that, and they had the numbers on the walls. And I saw some play. It was about if the Nazis had taken over Dublin. It could be 10 years ago when you were just a little brat in short trousers, and I thought, yeah, this is it really was a great atmosphere because it was like Berlin in the after the Blitz sort of thing. What's your association with Smock Alley? How did you get involved down there?
I love Smock Alley Theatre. I would agree with you. It's my favourite in the city, although I am incredibly biased. So I was when I was in college, I obviously needed to get myself a job. I ended up working in Smock Alley, and I still work there now. So I'm a front of house supervisor in Smock Alley now. But it's like a second home to me. It really is just a beautiful place to be and a gorgeous place to work. It never feels like work. It really doesn't. So it only seemed natural that our debut was to be there.
It also is, even the main auditorium, you're still very close to the performers, but particularly where you guys are going to be playing, which is the schoolhouse. I mean, it's almost like in your front room sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't have picked any other venue other than the boys' school for our first show. It's just the most atmospheric, beautiful space. Mm-hmm. I love it. I really do love it.
Given what you said about being kind of in the room there with us, that's really an effect that we're looking to come across with the show. So Boys Alley, as you said, really is ideal.
Yeah, well, I was there last year. Now I'm just as I say, blowing my own trumpet a little bit. I was there for Seen and Heard when Ren did Big Girl's Blouse.
Yeah, Ren Dennehy.
And I said I even got up and danced. So I mean, that's how close you are to the event. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Let's tell us then, Robert Patrick. How did you come across him? He's very much one for the Wikipedias. So he's an American playwright, and he kind of got his start in the Cafecino. So I came across him because when I was writing my thesis, I wrote my thesis on kind of the emergence of gay theatre in 1960s New York, with an emphasis on the Cafecino itself, which was it was the premier off-Broadway venue. So Broadway was too expensive, so people made off-Broadway, and then off-Broadway became too expensive, so people made off-Broadway. And shows at the Chino were put on for $20, $30 total. Playwrights weren't paid, actors weren't paid, nobody was paid. It was this wonderful, bohemian, queer cesspit of art. It was amazing. What a place to have been, I imagine. So I came across Robert Patrick and his plays while I was writing my thesis, and in particular I focused on The Haunted Host. So this is kind of a return to The Haunted Host for me, but from a very different angle. I'm no longer writing about it academically. It's all performance based. Yeah, we should point out to listeners that Robert Patrick, his real name, or his full name to give it, is Robert Patrick O'Connor. So
it is, yes.
He clearly has a bit of that Irishness in there.
There is a bit of a connection. There's a bit of a connection. He's been in touch with us, actually.
Has he?
Yeah, we've been in contact with him.
He must be ancient by this stage, mustn't he?
I won't comment on that.
Well, no, I just say he must be very advanced in years.
He was 21 in 1964.
Yeah.
So, or thereabouts, I believe. Yeah. So that'll be your guide towards it. But he was in contact and gave us best wishes and all of that. He runs a blog where he kind of keeps track of performances of his own plays and stuff. He's asked us to keep in touch with production shots.
Where does Bob live now?
He is out in California, as far as I'm aware.
What a surprise!
Not a surprise. No, out in the sun.
Yeah.
Surprise. No, out in the sun.
Yeah.
Well deserved after a career like his, but yeah, he's a lovely, lovely man. Very, very supportive and so funny, so witty as well. And that all comes through, of course, in his writing.
Yeah. Are you a fan of that period yourself, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, look...
sorry, Kevin, what am I talking about,
Robert? When I kind of first came across the play, I remember we were sitting in college and Mark just turns to me and goes, "Oh, look, give this a read, you might like it and you might think it's good." And at that time I had absolutely no idea about all the history and everything behind it. And I just read it and said, "Oh, listen, that's great, we should really put that on ourselves someday." And then all of a sudden we're putting it on and I'm looking it up and I realised there's just so much behind it, and that period was fascinating, you know? To think that you'd have Robert Patrick approached 5 different actors to play that lead role and all of them turned it down because it was too risque. I mean, that's amazing. That's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with me, but from my experience of that period, and I'm talking 64 to about 1970, where I feel like formally started discovering the world. There was no LGBT in those days. There was no gay in those days. There was just queer. Is that a description that you would endorse then?
Absolutely. Like we could get very academic here, but I spent kind of so long going down the rabbit hole of all of that and kind of queer representation in theatre and how that came across, and when these when certain phrases and terms were started to come into use and stuff like that, and it is fascinating, baffling, and also very very personal, obviously, for me. Being a gay man and reading about it. And in particular, I remember there was a great quote that I'm going to not only misquote, but probably misaccredit. But there was a great quote from one academic, I think it may have been Robert Wallace. He's a Canadian academic on this whole kind of thing. And he said, and he was writing in 1999, that he said that in mainstream media there was no place at that time for healthy, fully realised gay men on stage or queer people on stage. And that was in 1999.
Yeah.
So, and there was another great one in the just in general, queer representation, he said, could kind of be tracked along 2 different axes. So, invisibility and visibility, and friendliness and unfriendliness. So if you did have a queer character, they had to be a villain. They had to be a tragic figure who was, you know, suicidal, perverse, or somehow the bad guy. You know,
hasn't necessarily changed a huge amount. Has it?
I mean, listen, that's what I think is so important, and I think it's so important about this play, because I've been asked a couple of times, why are you putting on a play from the 60s? It's 2019, and why are you putting it on in Ireland? Ireland, the European bastion for queer rights. You know, like we're in such a wonderful place.
We're the benchmark. Now,
exactly. So we can all get married. It's over.
Yeah.
You know, we've won. But it's just not. That is just not the case. And that cultural idea around queerness and around gayness, around homosexuality, just all around the LGBT community, is still so ingrained and so internalized in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That, and I've said this before, that I think Ireland definitely on an institutional legislative level is doing so well.
Yeah.
But at a societal grassroots, conversations overheard on the street way, we have still got so far to go. Yeah. There is still so much wrong and so much internalized issue and homophobia in the society that we live in.
I will just share with you something that I saw yesterday. There's an event, I think, on Wednesday up at the Dáil, and it's a big kissing event of you know, hate triumphing over love triumphing over hate, all of that. And all it is two blokes, you know, playing a game of tonsil hockey, no big deal. And I put it up on the Facebook page, as you do, just to let people know that this is happening. And this guy came back. Now, I know that this guy is married to a person who stood in the last general election. And he wrote underneath it, "How disgusting." And I just wrote back and I said, "What is your problem with homosexuality?" You know, and then I posted a photograph of him with two big buffy blokes with beards swinging pints, and I said, a couple of more pints and you'd be probably all playing tonsil hockey.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But you, to a certain degree, Kevin, you would have grown up in what I would call post-liberation Ireland, in the sense that it's been changing here since about 2010, slowly, and then in 2015 we went over the summit.
Of course.
I tend to just slightly disagree with Mark. I never use the term "won." The term I use is "prevail." We prevail.
Yes, we prevailed.
Yeah. What was your memories, Kevin, of growing up around that time? Have you always seen it in a very positive light, or as Mark refers to it, have you seen that, what we would call the underbelly of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my first vote was for the gay marriage referendum. I think I was just 18 in and around that time.
Wasn't it a fabulous day?
Yeah, but then looking at kind of more so my personal life, and with an all boys primary and secondary school, you know, you do have some words like gay and faggot being thrown around and things like that. And then even recently, we were looking at a case where an Irish guy called Mark Power was attacked, and that was all based on his sexuality, and that was maybe only 3-4 weeks ago. So, no, I would agree with Mark. I think it's easy to look at legislation that's been passed and say, oh, look, we're making great progress, but on a ground level, perhaps we do have something to look at and something to work on.
Really only by default changed it in the north.
In
the last couple of weeks as well.
Like even that, saying that we've even prevailed, you know, that we have done well. Like, not all of us. You know, there's.
Oh, I agree.
And even like, I'm from the country. I'm from Cavan originally, and like I'll tell you for nothing, it's a very different situation in the country villages in this country than it is on Dame Street near the George.
I worked in Teddy for a few years, and I've always said it's one thing to be trans in Dublin 4 or in Dublin 2. It's a very different matter in Ballydehob, or, you know, and I'm only using that, or as you say, Cavan or Sligo or whatever. My first memory of LGBT theatre in Dublin was about 1972-73. There was a play that came out, and it was quite controversial at the time because it was fairly obvious what it was about. And it was a play called The Boys in the Band. Now, I know all about this because my father went to it and came back raving about it. And I thought, he wasn't a theatre person, but anyway. And and that came in here. Now, it was a lot of tittering and a lot of nudge, say no more sort of thing. So Dublin has always had quite an interesting, certainly in theatre, we've had a degree of acceptance that you certainly wouldn't have got in cinema. How do you feel about that?
I have very mixed feelings on the boys in the band.
Oh yeah, leaving aside the play, but I mean,
yeah. Oh well, yeah.
Play, and not only that, dare I say it, I think it played at the Gaiety.
Yeah. Well, I know what. So what is the question? Just that.
Well, I'm just saying that LGBT theatre has a lot more of a history here than if you talk that it wasn't there in 1999. It has been here for quite some time, and even to the extent of, dare I say it, Brendan being a queer fella, which is a lot more about Brendan and his sexuality than it was about Brendan and his politics.
Yeah, well, I when I was speaking, that quote that I mentioned is speaking exclusively about America and kind of Western theatre in America. But I to be totally honest, as far as my kind of scope on Irish LGBT history in theatre goes, I've obviously opened that lid and I've kind of tried to look around, but I've come up a little bit short. I'm absolutely sure you've seen much more than I have in especially in those kind of formative years, in those earlier years. But there is that I definitely agree. There is a kind of what I would say is there is a type of person. There's kind of like a community that surrounds theatres that I think would have been always a little bit more on the liberal leaning side anyway. Yeah. So as much as I definitely, you're definitely right that Irish theatre probably has had its steps in the right direction in decades gone by. I think those demographics, those people who were going to the Gaiety, those people who were going to the Olympia, probably weren't the people who needed to see it most. Yeah. I would have loved if that toured to the small country villages in this country.
Sure, absolutely. Is that something you're interested in yourself, Kevin? The history of LGBT theatre?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're delighted now to be doing. This is going to be the Irish premiere of The Haunted Host, and I mean, recently I think one of the best shows I've seen in my entire life. In Dublin Theatre Festival they had Burgers, which was a British performer, and they were just fantastic. A one-person show, and that completely reinvigorated my passion for theatre. Having seen Travis get up and perform, I thought that's, as I say, one of the best shows I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. They really were.
Well, something I was delighted to see about Robert Patrick is that he hung out with the bird, because my favourite playwright of the 20th century would have to be Tennessee Williams. Now, I've seen plenty of Tennessee Williams in the UK. I've seen Tennessee Williams in Australia. I've only seen Tennessee Williams here once, and that was probably 15-20 years ago at the Gate when they did Streetcar, and they which was again a phenomenal performance because they had Frances McDormand. But again, it's an interesting one, isn't it? You don't see a lot of Tennessee Williams here, and yet Tennessee was very interesting because so much of it is autobiographical, even though we think, oh yes, there's this woman and that one. No, that was Tennessee.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But no, they were friends. Yeah, they were in the same kind of circles. When you look at the Cappuccino, and it's kind of who has come through the door stuff. Some of it's incredible. Like the original poster for The Haunted Host was designed by Lanford Wilson. Yeah. Which I only found out when Robert Patrick told me, which I thought was just incredible. He actually in a text said, "This was designed by my friend Lance," and then it was only when I looked into it that I was like, "Oh, you mean Lanford Wilson?"
If you're interested in that sort of thing, the first out and out, I would have said, LGBT piece I ever read and really understood and loved was the work that defines pornography in UK law, and that is Last Exit to Brooklyn. I don't know if you've ever read it, but they eventually made a novel or a movie out of it, which is not that great. But there is a novella in that at the end that is just sensational, and I read it in probably about 1969 or thereabouts. If you've ever listened to Lou Reed's Transformer, then this is the piece to read for you. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'd have to give it a look.
Yeah, no, worth a look because he's a very odd writer, but he's a very interesting writer as well. I think he only wrote about 4 or 5 books in total.
Okay.
But let us move on. The Haunted Host. What is it all about? It's a two-hander to use a Harvey Weinstein expression.
Yes, it is a two-hander. It's just myself and Kevin, and we are playing Jay and Frank respectively. So in brief, it is about Jay being haunted by the ghost of his former lover. His name was Ed, and then
Is Ed dead?
yes, he is. Yeah, he's
Exactly.
he's dead.
Okay.
Ed has passed away, and Jay feels somewhat guilty for his passing. Feels that he has some responsibility in Ed's death. Then Frank, very very near the start of the play, so we're always on together. Frank appears at the door, sent over by a friend of a friend of a friend to stay the night. And when Jay opens the door, when I open the door, I see that Frank looks exactly like Ed, identical to Ed. So, and Frank, by the way, is a playwright, struggling playwright, and Jay is a little bit more prolific, a little bit better known, kind of good at it. Frank uses the night, or attempts to use the night, to try and further his playwriting skills, and Jay uses the night to try and absolve himself of the guilt he feels in Ed's death. So the two of them have their own kind of very underhand agendas, and in the kind of chaos that ensues, the two of them end up deconstructing kind of a lot of very wonderful conversations. We talk about sexual orientation, drugs, death. How much? My favourite part about it, I think, is that a big part of the play is talking about how much you can give to a person without kind of losing yourself in the process.
Yeah, and on that, I think we'd all have that person in our lives, and maybe it's multiple people who we saw over the course of 2 days, one day, maybe just a few hours, and they really changed us. And this is exactly what it is with these two guys. They don't know each other at all, and then at the play, at the end, you don't know if they're ever going to see each other again, but they completely transform each other in ways, and it's just a really, really succinct, lovely little piece to watch.
Now, I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but I have taken the occasional illegal substance in my day. And you know, when you're in a room with somebody and you think, they remind me of somebody, or I want them to remind me of somebody. Have you interpreted it in that respect in any regard?
Listen, there's a little. There might be the odd drug reference, like maybe in the play. No, I'm joking. It's full of them. Full of them.
What were they? I mean, my understanding is they might have been doing a bit of weed in those days. It was probably a lot of speed.
So in our kind of research, we found that at the time, kind of the most popular drugs to be taken recreationally would have been kind of amphetamines.
Yeah.
So at the time we watched a very funny but really shouldn't have been funny video of a housewife in the 1960s being given LSD to treat anxiety. And it just kind of records her in an interview with a man asking her, how do you feel? What are you seeing? What are you looking at? And she's absolutely in a different dimension. So that's our research.
Okay. You didn't need to do any hands-on. What about yourself then, Robert? I mean, or sorry, I keep calling you Robert. Kevin.
That's all right.
He looks so much like him.
Well, that's exactly how I'm just where would you like to go from this? Because this clearly is going to be a great foundation for future theatre for you.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Have you got anything you're working on at the moment that we should hear about so we can let listeners know in due course?
Yeah, well, I mean, Seen and Heard is coming up in February, as I'm sure you're well aware, and a lot of those plays will get announced, I think, this Friday on the 8th. A lot of plays have been submitted now, so on the 8th we're going to find out which ones got in, and so...
You got one yourself, have you?
Yeah, I'm attached to one at the moment, so hopefully now we'll get good news on Friday.
In case we have to twist a certain person's arm to get it in there.
It's written by the wonderful Aoife Morrison. I think she's going to wait to put a nice title on it, but for the moment, yeah, it's in a good place. We had a couple of rehearsals and fingers crossed for us.
Yeah. And, Mark, we're going to let you have the last word on that. The bums on seats issue. Tell us where, when, and...
Smock Alley Theatre, Monday to Friday, 8 p.m, €15, and you will enjoy it.
Yeah. Just
I promise.
a slight, as we say, parental advisories. You've put down that it's suitable for 14 plus. And we hard and fast on that one because I'm just I'm just doing the parental one and thinking, you bring your 14-year-old daughter to this and she hears a lot about as we say, male appendage and drug use.
No, not so much of the male appendage, not as much as I'd like, but there is a there's a good bit of drug reference. Look, I put it like this. How mature do you think your child is? If you think they're okay with a couple of references to smoking weed, then yeah, bring them along. No, not so much of the male appendage, not as much as I'd like, but there's a good bit of drug reference. Look, I put it like this. How mature do you think your child is? If you think they're okay with a couple of references to smoking weed, then yeah, bring them along.
Okay. Just before we go, another mutual acquaintance. This coming Friday, it's the 8th of November. Drop Dead Twice, the queer cabaret with the fabulous Evoca Reaction. Highly recommend. Go down and see Haunted Host at Smock Alley and then schlep up there to just Francis Street or just off Thomas Street. £8 for early goers, which you wouldn't be going to available if you were going to the play, but well worth a tenner. So I want to say thank you to Mark O'Reilly and Kevin McMahon, who I will also always known as Robert. It's been a delight having you in today, and let's have you back again for season 5.
Thank you so much for having us, Nick. Thank you.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.